I'm so glad you could make it today. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, and let's just talk for a while. There's something heavy on my mind, something I've been researching right here in this office for quite some time, and I felt a real sense of urgency to share it with you. You and we've reached a season of life where we truly understand the value of a single day, don't we? We know what it's like to wake up and feel that stiffness in our joints, that slight fog in the morning, or that nagging fatigue that seems to settle in just when we want to be most active with our grandchildren or our hobbies. We've been told by the world that it's just part of getting old, a slow decline we have to accept. But what if I told you that most of what we're feeling isn't a requirement of age, but a result of a massive disconnection from the way we were designed to live? Think with me for a moment. Have you ever stopped to marvel at the sheer physical endurance of the man we call the Messiah? We often think of the miracles, the teaching, and the divinity, but let's look at the man. Jesus walked hundreds of miles over rugged, dusty terrain under a punishing sun. He stood for hours, speaking with a voice that reached thousands without a microphone. He worked as a carpenter in a time when that meant hauling heavy timber and shaping stone with nothing but hand tools. Where did that raw, physical vigor come from? It wasn't just magic. He had a human body just like yours and mine, and that body had to be built, nourished, and protected from the very first day. And who was the architect of that strength? It was Mary. I want you to close your eyes and come with me to a small stone house in Nazareth. Forget the sterile marble statues you see in cathedrals. I want you to smell the real Nazareth. It's early morning and the air is dry, tasting of sun-baked dust and the sharp, spicy scent of wild herbs crushed underfoot. You hear a rhythmic scraping sound, a comforting, steady friction. That's the sound of Mary's hands on the saddle cornerstone. She isn't just making a meal, she is preparing a silent pharmacy. She knew things that we are only now, 2,000 years later, rediscovering through modern science. When we look at the archaeology of that tiny village, we find something fascinating. They didn't have the fluffy, white, processed flour that sits on our grocery store shelves today, the kind that makes our blood sugar spike and leaves us feeling bloated and tired. No, Mary worked with ancient barley. To the Romans, it was the food of peasants, but to Mary, it was a super bread. Have you ever noticed how a simple piece of toast today can make you feel sluggish or heavy an hour later? That's because our modern grains have been stripped of their life. But the barley Mary sifted through her fingers was different. It was rich, dense, and full of fiber that acted like a broom, sweeping through the body, cleaning out the arteries, and providing a slow, steady burn of energy that lasted all day. I often wonder how much of our modern struggle with diabetes and heart health could be solved if we just returned to that humble table. Mary was a strategist of care. She knew her son had a grand destiny, a mission that would require every ounce of his strength, and she made an irreversible decision to turn her kitchen into a spiritual and physical shield. Every grain of barley she chose was an act of protection for his health. It makes you think, doesn't it? If the Savior of the world needed this kind of intentional nourishment to sustain his earthly body, how much more do we need it now, in these golden years when our bodies are asking us for a little more help? I look around my office at all these reports and historical texts, and it becomes so clear. We've been looking for health in plastic bottles filled with expensive chemicals, while the real medicine was sitting on a wooden table in Galilee all along. Mary's kitchen wasn't just a place to eat. It was a fortress against the illnesses of her time. But I have to ask you, do you think bread alone was enough to keep him going through the heat of the desert and the stress of his mission? Do you think a simple loaf was the only secret Mary held in her weathered hands? There was something else. A liquid gold that she used to lubricate the very gears of life, protecting his heart and keeping his mind sharp as a razor. Do you know what that gold was? Because once you understand it, your own kitchen will never look the same again. Stay with me for a moment longer in that small, sun-drenched room in Nazareth. I want you to really see it, to feel the atmosphere of that home. The morning sun has climbed higher now, casting long, golden fingers of light across the dirt floor. There is a specific smell in the air. It's the scent of dry earth mixed with the sharp, sweet smoke of olive wood burning slowly in the hearth. Can you hear the soft crackle of that fire? It's a rhythmic, peaceful sound that tells you this is a place of preparation and deep, intentional care. This wasn't a place of hurry or stress. In Mary's kitchen, every movement was a prayer, and every ingredient was a choice made with the future in mind. I want to talk to you about something Mary held in high regard, something I've come to call the liquid gold of the Holy Land. As I sit here in my office looking at these historical accounts, I am struck by how central this one substance was to the vitality of the Messiah. I'm talking about the olive oil of Judea. Now, don't just think of the clear, thin liquid you find in a plastic bottle at the supermarket today. That's not what Mary used. The oil in her kitchen was thick, vibrant, and carried a deep green hue that looked like captured sunlight. It was heavy with the life of the ancient trees that clung to the rocky hillsides of Galilee. Have you ever felt like your body is an old piece of machinery that started to grind its gears? Maybe you feel it when you try to stand up after sitting for a while, or when you reach for something on a high shelf. That stiffness, that rust we feel in our joints and our arteries, is what modern doctors call inflammation. But Mary didn't need a medical degree to understand that a body in constant motion needs the right kind of lubricant to stay fluid and strong. She knew that her son, who would one day carry a heavy wooden cross up a steep hill, needed a heart and a circulatory system that were as clear and open as a mountain stream. Think about how olive oil was made in those days. It wasn't processed with high heat or chemicals in a distant factory. No, it was cold-pressed under the weight of massive stones. This process preserved every single nutrient, every polyphenol, those wonderful little compounds that we now know act like a cleaning crew for our veins. When Jesus dipped his barley bread into that rich oil, he wasn't just eating, he was fortifying his heart. That oil was working behind the scenes, sweeping away the rust and keeping his blood flowing smoothly, ensuring that his mind stayed sharp and his endurance remained unmatched. Doesn't it make sense that the Creator would leave the cure for our most common ailments right there in the fruit of a tree? We've spent so many years looking for health in expensive, man-made prescriptions that often come with a list of side effects longer than the benefits. But here was Mary, 2,000 years ago, using the earth's own medicine to protect the most important life in history. She chose the oil that was first press, the purest of the pure. She understood that the quality of the fuel determines the power of the engine. I often ask myself, why have we moved so far away from this simplicity? We live in a world of low-fat everything, yet we are more tired and more inflamed than any generation before us. We've replaced the healthy, life-giving fats that Mary used with processed oils that actually cause the very rust we are trying to avoid. Can you imagine the difference it would make in your own life, in your energy levels and your heart health, if you started treating your body with the same strategic care that Mary showed her son? I want you to visualize Mary standing by her hearth, pouring that liquid gold into a clay lamp, and then drizzling it over the morning meal. She knew that this oil was a gift, a promise of longevity and strength. It was the lubricant of life, the secret to a body that could withstand the desert heat and the weight of a world-changing mission. But as vital as the oil was, Mary had another secret tucked away in the shadows of her kitchen. It was something sweet, something hidden in the cracks of the rocks and the hearts of wildflowers, a sweetness that did more than just please the palate. It acted as a shield against the very air they breathed. Do you know what kind of sweetness could possibly be powerful enough to protect the Savior's health? Because that is where our journey goes next. We often see him in paintings with a glowing circle around his head, looking calm and untouched by the world. But I want you to look closer with me today. I want us to set aside the stained glass and the marble for a moment and look at the man. He wasn't a ghost walking an inch above the ground. He was a man of flesh and bone, a man who felt the biting chill of the Judean nights and the blistering, relentless heat of the midday sun. Have you ever stopped to think about the sheer physical toll his mission took on him? When I sit here in my office and read the accounts of his travels, I see a man who walked nearly 20 miles in a single day, often on an empty stomach, over sharp rocks and through thick dust. I see a man who was constantly surrounded by crowds, people pressing in on him, touching him, coughing, shivering with fevers, and carrying every kind of illness known to the ancient world. He didn't have a private carriage or a sanitized room to retreat to. He was right there in the thick of it. He felt the same bone-weary exhaustion that you and I feel after a long day of work or a stressful week of family obligations. He felt that heaviness in the limbs and that dip in energy when the spirit is willing but the body is screaming for rest. Now think about your own life for a second. When you are under a lot of stress or when you aren't sleeping well, what's the first thing to break down? It's your immune system, isn't it? You start to feel that tickle in your throat or that sudden drop in vitality. Jesus faced a level of stress that we can barely imagine, the weight of a world-changing destiny, the constant demands of thousands of people, and the physical hardship of a nomad's life. So, how did he stay upright? How did his body resist the plagues of the time while he was touching the very people who carried them? This is where we see the genius of Mary's kitchen once again. She knew that her son needed a shield, but not a shield of iron or bronze. He needed a shield that lived inside his blood. In the shadows of her small stone house, tucked away in the cracks of the pantry, Mary kept a jar of something truly miraculous. I'm talking about wild, raw honey. Now please, don't confuse this with the clear golden syrup we see in plastic bears at the grocery store today. That modern stuff is often little more than flavored sugar, processed until all the life is gone. No, the honey Mary sought out was the sweetness from the rocks. It was thick, dark, and cloudy, filled with the essence of 1,000 different Galilee wildflowers, thyme, hyssop, and wild clover. It was humanity's first and most powerful antibiotic. Have you ever wondered why honey is the only food that never spoils? Archaeologists have found honey in ancient tombs that is still edible after thousands of years. Mary understood this eternal quality. She knew that when she gave her son a spoonful of that wild honey, or stirred it into his morning barley water, she was coating his throat and his system with a living barrier. It wasn't just a treat, it was a medicine that fought off bacteria and boosted his resilience. It was the immune shield that allowed him to stand in the middle of a diseased crowd and remain a pillar of health. But Mary didn't stop at the honey. She was a master of the seasons. She knew that the body's strength starts in the gut, what we now call our second brain. When Jesus traveled, she made sure his pack was filled with dried figs and dates. Think about a sun-dried fig for a moment. It's small, it's humble, but it is packed with a concentrated explosion of fiber and minerals. These fruits were the original energy bars. They kept his digestion perfect and his energy stable during those long uphill climbs to Jerusalem. Do you remember the taste of a real sun-ripened fruit from your own childhood? Perhaps a berry picked straight from a bush, or a piece of fruit that hadn't been waxed or gassed in a warehouse. There was a vitality in those things, wasn't there? That is exactly what Mary provided. She understood that a healthy gut leads to a clear mind and a strong heart. She was protecting her son from the inside out, ensuring that his body wouldn't fail him when the world needed him most. I look at the struggles we face today, the constant colds, the digestive issues, the feeling that our bodies are vulnerable to every passing bug. And I have to ask, have we forgotten the shield that God placed in the wildflowers and the trees? We've traded Mary's immune shield for processed sugars that actually weaken our defenses. We've traded the life-giving fiber of the fig for snacks that leave us feeling sluggish and bloated. Can you see the image of Mary now? carefully choosing the best honey, checking the figs for their sweetness, and packing them with a mother's prayer. She wasn't just preparing a snack, she was fortifying the Savior of the world. She knew that his mission required a body that could endure anything. But as sweet as the honey was, and as nourishing as the fruits were, there was another side to the Messiah's strength. Because life isn't always sweet, is it? Sometimes, to truly heal, the body needs something sharp, something that stings the tongue and cleanses the blood from the inside. Do you know why Mary insisted on adding a bit of bitterness to the table? Because that bitterness held a secret for the liver and the blood that we desperately need to rediscover today. But now, we've come to a crossroads in our journey through Mary's kitchen. We've tasted the rich barley, the liquid gold of the olive oil, and the heavenly sweetness of the wild honey. It feels good, doesn't it? It feels safe. But I have to be honest with you, and at our age, we value honesty above almost anything else. Strength isn't built on sweetness alone. To truly prepare her son for the monumental task ahead, Mary had to make a difficult, courageous choice. She had to reach for the things that sting. She had to embrace the bitterness. I want you to see her now, out in the rocky soil just beyond her doorstep. The sun is high and the wind is kicking up the dust. She isn't looking for the pretty flowers today. She is looking for the jagged leaves of the wild chicory, the sharp stalks of the dandelion, and the humble, woody stems of the hyssop. These aren't ingredients you use to please a child's palate. These are the tools of a master healer. She stands there, looking at those bitter greens, and she knows. She knows that to keep his blood pure, to keep his liver strong, and to keep his spirit resilient against the poisons of the world, she must bring this sharpness to his table. Have you ever noticed how we, in our modern world, have completely edited bitter out of our lives? We want everything coated in sugar or salt. But have you ever felt that peculiar heaviness in your middle, that sluggishness that no amount of coffee or rest can fix? That is the sound of a body crying out for a deep cleaning. Your body is a magnificent machine, but every machine has filters. Your liver, your blood, your digestive tract, they are the filters of your life. And after 60 or 70 years of service, those filters can get backed up. Mary understood something we've forgotten. The tongue is the gateway to the liver. When that bitterness hits the back of the throat, it sends a lightning bolt through the system. It tells the body, wake up, clean the filters, purify the stream. This was Mary's point of decision. She could have played it safe. She could have given him only the soft bread and the sweet fruit. But she was a strategist of care. She knew that her son would one day face the ultimate stress, the ultimate physical and spiritual battle. She knew his blood had to be as clean as the mountain air. So, with a hand that didn't tremble, she gathered those bitter herbs. She didn't see them as a punishment. She saw them as a purification. She was making an irreversible decision to protect his health at the most fundamental level. Think about the courage that takes. It's easy to give someone what they want, but it takes a leader, it takes a mother with a vision, to give them what they need to be powerful. I look at the bottles of pills on so many of our nightstands today, the endless prescriptions we take to manage our sluggishness, and I wonder, why have we run away from the bit of bitterness that God placed in the very weeds of the field? Why do we fear the sting that actually heals? And then there was the hyssop. You've read about it in the Psalms, haven't you? Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. That wasn't just a poetic metaphor or a religious ritual. Mary knew that hyssop was a powerhouse for the lungs and the blood. In the dry, dusty air of Galilee, where the breath could easily become heavy, she used this sacred plant to ensure his lungs were clear and his breath was strong. She would bundle those aromatic branches and steep them, creating a tonic that acted as a natural expectorant. She was arming him from the inside out, making sure that when he stood on a mountainside to speak to 5,000 people, his voice would be as clear as a bell, and his lungs would be full of life. I want you to feel the tension of that moment in her kitchen. She is chopping those bitter greens, the sharp scent filling the small room. She knows they will make him wince for a moment. But she also knows they will make him stand taller. She is choosing the vigor of the sting over the laziness of the sweet. This is the point of no return for any of us who want to reclaim our vitality. Are you ready to make that same choice? Are you ready to stop avoiding the sharp edges of health and start embracing the things that actually cleanse your blood and restore your energy? I see this so clearly now, sitting here among my books and research. Mary wasn't just cooking. She was conducting a symphony of detoxification. She was ensuring that the Messiah's body was a temple free of rust and clutter. She used the bitterness of the earth to stimulate the bile and the liver, those silent engines of our health that are so often overtaxed by the modern world's medications and processed fats. It was a moment of pure, gritty wisdom. She looked at her son, knowing the road he would walk, and she chose the medicine of the earth, no matter how sharp it tasted. She was preparing him for the desert, for the long nights, and for the heavy burdens. She knew that a body purified by bitterness is a body that cannot be easily broken. But as vital as this cleansing was, the journey wasn't finished. Because once the body is clean, it needs the kind of power that only the ancient proteins of the land can provide. Do you know what kind of food gave him the strength of a lion without ever weighing him down? Because that is the secret that kept his mind sharp and his muscles firm until the very end. We've cleaned the filters with those bitter herbs, haven't we? We've lubricated the joints and fortified the heart. But now I want to ask you something very important, something I think about every time I look at my own hands or feel the steady beat of my own heart in this quiet office. Where does the raw animal strength come from? How did a man walk the entire length of the Holy Land, standing for days on end, speaking with a voice that carried over the wind without his muscles giving out, or his mind becoming clouded by the sheer weight of his responsibility? You see, a mission as great as the one Jesus carried required more than just a clean system. It required the strength of a lion and a mind as sharp as a polished sword. And Mary, in her quiet, strategic wisdom, knew exactly where to find that power. She didn't look to the heavy, fatty meats of the Roman banquets that left men sleepy and slow. No, she turned her eyes toward the shimmering blue waters of the Sea of Galilee and the humble, sun-drenched fields of legumes. I want you to travel with me to the lakeshore for a moment. Close your eyes and feel the cool breeze coming off the water. It's early morning, and the fishing boats are just touching the sand. Can you hear the silver flash of the fish jumping in the nets? Mary would have been there, or perhaps she waited for the fresh catch to be brought to the village market. She was looking for what we now call the St. Peter's fish, the tilapia of the Galilee. Now, why does this matter to you and me today, sitting here in our 70s? Because that fish was swimming with what modern science calls primitive omega-3s. But Mary didn't need a lab report to see the result. She saw a son whose eyes were always bright, whose memory was flawless, and whose focus never wavered, even when thousands were shouting for his attention. Have you ever felt that frustrating brain fog? That moment where a name or a word is right on the tip of your tongue but just out of reach? We've been told it's just a senior moment, a natural decline. But what if your brain is simply starving for the same cognitive fire that Mary provided at her table? She knew that the brain is a hungry organ, and by serving that fresh, clean protein from the water, she was building a shield around his mind. She was ensuring that the parables he told, those complex, beautiful stories that changed the world, would be delivered with absolute clarity. That fish was the fuel for the greatest intellect to ever walk the earth. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If we return to that simple, clean protein, how much of our own mental sharpness could we reclaim for our grandchildren and our legacies? But there was more. Mary knew that a sharp mind needs a strong frame to carry it. She looked at the long uphill climbs to Jerusalem, miles of steep, rocky paths that would break a lesser man. To prepare him, she reached for the protein of the poor, the lentils and the beans that grew in the red earth of Galilee. In our modern world, we've pushed these things to the side, haven't we? We think of them as side dishes or filler, But in Mary's kitchen, a pot of red lentils was a vat of liquid endurance. Think about the texture of a well-cooked lentil stew. It's hearty, it's dense, and it stays with you. Mary understood that this was a slow burn energy. It didn't give a quick spike and a crash like the sugary snacks we see today. It provided a steady, ironclad strength that lasted from sunrise to sunset. When Jesus stood on that mountainside and spoke for hours, his muscles weren't trembling with fatigue. His legs were like pillars of stone because they had been built on the ancestral proteins of the land. Does it ever feel like your own strength is a flickering candle, sometimes bright and sometimes dim? Do you find yourself sitting down more often, feeling like the engine just doesn't have the torque it used to? Mary's choice of legumes tells us that we can rebuild that muscle power at any age. She chose the food of longevity. She knew that these humble beans were cleaning the blood while they were building the fiber of the heart. This was the result of her strategy. Because Mary sat at that hearth and chose the fish over the heavy fats and the lentils over the empty grains, she changed the course of history. She ensured that when the moment of the great sacrifice came, the Savior's body was ready. He didn't fail halfway through his mission. He didn't succumb to the diseases of the time. He was a pillar of vitality until the very last breath. The moral of this story, my friends, is a truth as solid as the rocks of Nazareth. The body is the temple of the Spirit, but it is a temple that must be built with intention. Mary wasn't just a cook. She was the architect of the Messiah's physical endurance. She proved that what God places in the water and the soil is enough to sustain a world-changing purpose. I look at you today and I see people with so much wisdom left to give, so much love left to share. Your mission isn't over just because the calendar says you've reached a certain age. But to fulfill that mission, you need a body that can keep up with your spirit. Are you ready to sit at Mary's table? Are you ready to trade the fog for the fire and the weakness for the strength of the lion? Because once you make that decision, just as Mary did, you'll find that the golden years aren't a time of fading away, but a time of shining brighter than ever before. But tell me, after the fish and the lentils, there was one more thing, a white liquid that kept his bones like iron. Do you know why it wasn't the milk you find in your fridge today? I've shared a lot with you today, haven't I? My desk here is covered in these notes about ancient grains and Galilee oils, but as I look at you through this lens, I see more than just a student of history. I see a companion on a very specific journey. We've talked about the barley, the oil, and the honey, but now I want to lean in and talk about the heart of the matter. Because let's be honest with each other, at our age, health isn't just about living longer. It's about having the strength to finish our race with our heads held high. It's about being more than just a memory for our children. It's about being a living, breathing pillar of wisdom in their lives right now. I know what it's like when the house gets a little too quiet in the evenings. I know that feeling when you look at an empty chair and the weight of loss feels heavier than any physical ailment. We've all said goodbye to people we thought would be with us until the very end. We've all felt that creeping fear that maybe our best days are behind us, and that the world is moving on to a faster, louder rhythm that doesn't have a place for us. But I want you to listen to me very closely. Mary didn't nourish the Messiah just so he could survive. She nourished him so he could fulfill a purpose that changed the universe. And your purpose, the reason you are still drawing breath today, is just as intentional. Do you remember I mentioned that white liquid? The one that kept his bones as firm as the stone columns of the temple? In our modern world, we've been told that milk is milk, but Mary knew better. She didn't have large herds of heavy cows. She had goats. Now you might think, what difference does that make? It makes all the difference for a body that has seen 70 years of life. Goat's milk and the simple curds she made, what we call labna today, were the original probiotics. They were soft on the stomach, easy to digest, and packed with the kind of calcium that doesn't just sit in your system, but actually goes to work strengthening your frame. Have you noticed how a fall or a stumble feels like a much bigger threat than it used to? That's the fear of fragility. But Mary's table was a direct answer to that fear. By choosing these artisanal fermented foods, she was protecting the second brain in the gut, ensuring that the Messiah's immunity was ironclad and his bones were resilient. She was building a body that could stand firm. And I'm telling you, it is never too late for you to start rebuilding your own foundation. You don't have to accept becoming fragile as your only option. And then there was the wine. I'm not talking about the excess of a Roman banquet. I'm talking about the heart tonic of the Judean hills. When Mary served a cup of red wine at the end of a long day, she was providing her son with a gift of joy and a shield for his heart. We now know that the dark skins of those ancient grapes were bursting with antioxidants that relax the blood vessels and cheer the spirit. It was a way to say that life, even with all its burdens, is meant to be savored. Does it ever feel like your joy has become a little thin lately? Like the stresses of health and the worries about the future have clouded that spark you used to have? I want you to think of Mary's kitchen as a place where joy was a requirement. She knew that a heavy heart makes for a heavy body. She used the gifts of the vine to keep the blood flowing and the spirit light. She was teaching us that being a steward of our health is actually an act of worship. It's a way of saying thank you for the life we've been given. I want to challenge you today to stop looking at your age as a countdown and start looking at it as a legacy. You are a leader in your family. You are a repository of stories, lessons, and love that no one else on this earth can provide. But you can't pour from an empty cup, can you? If you are tired, if your mind is foggy, and if your body is rusting from the inside out, you can't be the beacon your grandchildren need you to be. Are you ready to make a decision today? Not just a dietary choice, but a life-changing commitment to treat your body with the same strategic care that Mary showed her son? I'm asking you to look at your kitchen not as a place of chores, but as your own private pharmacy. Every time you choose the liquid gold over the processed oils, or the bit of bitterness over the empty sugars, you are reclaiming a piece of your vitality. You are telling the world and telling yourself that you aren't done yet. Think of the strength of a lion and the heart of a servant. That is what this journey is about. It's about waking up tomorrow morning and feeling that the fog has lifted, that the joints are moving a little smoother, and that the fire in your spirit is burning a little brighter. We have so much work left to do, you and I. There are still many hands to hold, many prayers to say, and many lives to touch. Don't let fear or habit keep you from the table God has prepared for you. The ingredients are there, the wisdom is ancient, and the results are proven by the very life of the one who walked the dusty roads of Galilee. Pull up that chair one more time. Take a deep breath. Can you feel that sense of possibility? That is the strength of the Messiah calling to the strength in you. It's time to come home to the kitchen of Nazareth. It's time to live with the vigor you were always meant to have. I'm right here with you, and I believe in the power of the change you're about to make. Shall we begin? I look at the stacks of research on my desk, the ancient maps of Galilee, and these notes I've spent months gathering, and I feel a profound sense of completion. But more than that, I feel a new beginning. We've traveled a long way together in these last 30 minutes, haven't we? We've walked through the sun-baked dust of Nazareth, felt the cool breeze of the Sea of Galilee, and sat at a humble stone table that is 2,000 years old. It's been quite a journey, and I'm so grateful you decided to walk it with me. Think back on everything we've gathered today. We've discovered a pharmacy that doesn't live in a plastic bottle, but in the soil and the trees. We've seen the barley that acts as a broom for our spirits and our arteries. We've tasted the liquid gold of the olive that removes the rust from our joints. We've felt the shield of the wild honey, the purifying sting of the bitter herbs, and the cognitive fire of the Galilee fish. We've even seen how the protein of the poor and the gentle milk of the goat can turn a fragile frame into a pillar of iron. It's a complete system of care, isn't it? And the most beautiful part is that it wasn't designed by a corporation or a laboratory. It was prepared by the hands of a mother who knew that her son's mission required every ounce of his human strength. I want you to take a moment and just look at your own hands. Go ahead, look at them. These hands have worked for decades. They've built homes. They've held newborn babies. They've folded in prayer during the darkest nights. And they've guided your family through the storms of life. You are a repository of wisdom. You are a living library of stories and lessons that our world, especially the younger generation, desperately needs right now. But I have to ask you, How can you share that wisdom if you are too tired to speak? How can you lead your family if your mind is clouded by fog, or your body is weighed down by the scarcity of the modern desert? You see, my friend, your health is not just a personal matter. It is your legacy. When you choose to sit at Mary's table, you aren't just going on a diet. You are making a strategic decision to be a beacon of light for your grandchildren. You are choosing to be the grandfather who can still go for a walk in the park, the grandmother who remembers every detail of a family story, the pillar of the community who stands tall and vibrant. Mary didn't nourish Jesus just so he could survive. She nourished him so he could change the world. And I truly believe that God isn't finished with you yet. There is still a world-changing purpose in your life, but you need a body that can keep up with your spirit. I often think about the kitchens of our own childhoods, perhaps a farmhouse in the Midwest or a small home in the hills, where the smell of real food filled the air. We've lost that connection, haven't we? We've traded the abundance of the promised land for the convenience of a box. But today, you've seen that the road back to vitality is simpler than you thought. It's a return to the basics. It's a return to the ingredients that the Creator placed in the earth specifically to sustain us in our golden years. I don't want this to be the end of our conversation. In fact, I'd like to think of this as the beginning of a weekly tradition. Every week I sit right here in this office, surrounded by these old books and new reports, searching for the hidden gems of our faith and our health. I would be honored if you would pull up a chair and join me every time. There is so much more to explore, more secrets from the Holy Land, more ways to reclaim our energy, and more stories to tell. If you felt a spark of hope today, or if you felt that fire in your spirit starting to burn again, would you do me a favor? Just join our circle here. It's a way for us to stay connected, like old friends meeting on a porch at sunset. And please, don't keep this bread to yourself. We all have a brother, a sister, or a dear friend who feels disposable, who thinks that their health is a lost cause. Send this message to them. Share this journey with them. Let's create a community of people who refuse to fade away, who choose to shine brighter as the years go by. As I get ready to turn off the lamp here in my office, I want to leave you with a final thought. You are precious. Your life has meaning, and your vitality is a gift to everyone who knows you. Go to your kitchen today. Look at your table with new eyes. Choose the life-giving fats, the ancient grains, and the sweetness of the wildflowers. Treat your body with the same reverence that Mary showed her son. I'm already looking forward to our next talk. I'll be right here, waiting for you. May your heart be light, your mind be clear as a Galilean morning, and your strength be renewed day by day. Stay strong, stay inspired, and remember, you were made to thrive. I'll see you very soon.